my dear brothers of Trinidad and sisters, brothers and sisters of Trinidad and Tobago, dear brothers and sisters of this noble house, I wish you all a good day in the name of Almighty God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Madam President, thank you for the opportunity to join this debate, which deals with proposed amendments to the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act, which was passed by the People's Partnership Government in January 2015 and later amended by this government in their last term in 2016 and then again in 2017. Madam President, I would like to preface my presentation by sharing with the people of Trinidad and Tobago, in like manner with Senator Richards, how we can connect what we do here in this noble house with the actual man and woman on the street. Madam President, the damaging effect that not only this bill, but any bill that could facilitate corruption has on the people of Trinidad and Tobago personally is of dire and immediate concern to all of us. For every unregulated dollar stolen by corruption, that is an available hospital bed gone. A CT scan machine, a dialysis machine, not bought. A cancer treatment center, an upgraded healthcare system, never built, that would save lives and serve the needs of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. For every unregulated dollar stolen by nepotism, that is a defunding of education, cutting of scholarships, cutting of gate, inability to upgrade schools that only serve Form 5 students and never have Form 6 students graduate to that level. For example, in the constituency of Tinapuna, we have Astra Girls, St. Charles RC, and Tinapuna Secondary, who do very well at the Form 5 level, but can get no funding from the government to increase their Form 6 capacity, and countless others across the country. For every unregulated dollar stolen by corruption, we have a government that needs to beg the private sector and businesses for laptops for students at all levels, unable to pay better salaries to teachers and administrators. For every unregulated dollar stolen by conflict of interest, that is an ineffective national agricultural policy that only gives seedlings and few land leases, chastises doubles, while failing to promote anything that can be termed as transformational policy to better serve farmers and their families. For every unregulated dollar stolen by our failure to hold this government to account, that is a national sporting organization, underfunded, leading to disenchantment, less participation in sporting disciplines, poor results, poor representation, less hope to escape poverty, poor fields, poor stadia, fly-by-night coaches hired, and a national malaise. And as Senator Lachmidial said, sport is an uplifter and a unifier in our country and has been historically so. For every unregulated dollar stolen by corruption, that leads to a less than dynamic trade and industry sector, which cannot stimulate growth and demand, which leads to job loss and a subsequent brain drain among our best and brightest. In other words, Madam President, should we, who are elected or appointed to represent the people of this great country, be cavalier in our examination of this bill, in our prosecution in this bill, and derelict in our duty to protect our middle and working class brothers and sisters who stand to be most affected by the passing of this bill, then we would have committed an historical injustice to our people and generations to follow. Madam President, there are several disturbing clauses in this bill. But before I go into the bill itself, I want to ask this government, since they amended the Act in 2016 and again in 2017, why the amendments that we debate today were not brought then? I want to know how many times are we going to amend this Act before implementing it? It has to be a record. I can't think of any Act amended so many times before it is even operationalized. And since the government would like to pass this bill by simple majority, I would like this government to tell the Senate and the country by extension exactly when the Act will be operationalized. I would like to ask, have the regulations to the Act been completed after this debate, Madam President? I would say no, it has not. And if so, why not? Because as far as I see, there's nothing in the original Act, that makes it unworkable, despite anything that we might hear. And what can we hear, Madam President? What we have heard is speculation. Yes, we will do. Trust us. We are your colleagues, not your friends. We have not been mandated by our people of Trinidad and Tobago to trust you with anything. We do not trust you. We will not trust you. We cannot trust you. We are here to account to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and you must bring ironclad legislation for us to pass it. You see, Madam President, if this was some other bill, we might be prepared to be lenient with this passage, but this bill is seeking to amend the existing procurement laws to make it easier to sell off property held on trust by the government for the people, without the involvement or protection of the independent office of procurement regulator. One can't get any more blatant or bold-faced than that, Madam President. Why are we seeking to amend Section 13, subsection 1 of the Act? Their proposed amendment in reality emasculates the office of the procurement regulator. That has been said over and over by the senators. The essence of the amendment is a virtual gutting of the Act and makes it, in reality, a disguised repeal of the Procurement Act, making it a virtual paper tiger. When these amendments are passed, God forbid, the reasonable citizen would have to ask whether there still is, in reality, a Procurement Act. Why are we removing the procurement regulator from the equation? When it comes to the sale of government assets and provision of financial services, sale of government land, buildings, refineries, industrial plants, should be the very thing we need the procurement regulator to be involved in as a safeguard for our country's patrimony. Don't try and fool the country by talking about Singapore and US and Canada and New Zealand. That is not our reality here, and certainly not with this government.
Senator Nakhid, you can make your presentation, but there's no need to be shouting. So I'd ask you to... Thank you.
Thank you. There are assets being held by the government as a result of the 2009 bailout of CLICO. It has been bandied about that assets such as Twin City Mall, Long Circular Mall, are to be sold in short order without the independent procurement regulator.
48.1, the bill has nothing to do with that. The law is not being amended that way.
Senator Nakhid, could you try and be a little more relevant to the bill, please? Okay?
Guided, madam. I would like to know who will guard the public interest from political financiers in what I am told is a fire sale of assets. I would like to ask if...
I rise respectfully again on Standing Order 46.1. This bill has nothing to do with disposal of assets. That is not being accepted from the law.
I would like to know who will guard the public interest from political financiers.
Senator Nakhid, I would ask you to look at the parent legislation, specifically the O that is being deleted. I'd ask you to take a look at it, and I therefore uphold the Attorney General's objection.
Madam, We are also removing government-to-government dealings from the scrutiny of the procurement regulator. So who is going to buy a refinery in a fire sale? Wilmer Ruperti, Ashrubel Chavez, or Nicolas Maduro? Can we trust the government with the assets of Petrotrin?
On Standing Order 46-1 for the same reasons again.
Petrotrin was not for sale.
Senator Nakhid, hold on. You have a short space of time. I would ask you to be relevant to the bill and accurate as well.
Petrotrin does not belong to the government, Madam President. It belongs to the people. Long after we politicians are gone on our merry way.
Again, on Standing Order 46-1.
Senator Nakhid, could you move on, please? Just move on to another part of your presentation.
What are we going to put in place of the procurement regulator? It might be better to be careful who we put. Anyone, it seems, might be better than the current Minister of Finance. I want to know, Madam President, if the procurement regulations will be tailor-made to apply to the Minister of Finance, and if not, why not? This is the same Minister of Finance who failed to report to the police that persons in the private sector tried to bribe him. So now we have a bunch of corrupt people walking around who try to bribe a government minister, and they walk around with impunity. And we all know what our parents said about the upholder and facilitator being worse than the perpetrator. So we have a finance minister who, by failing to report these corrupt individuals by his inaction, basically protects them. And this is the Minister of Finance who we are to put to replace the independent procurement regulator. How is this Minister of Finance to protect the public from government financiers when he's part of the government? It reads like a vaudeville show. I would like to know what is there in the legislation to circumscribe the power of the Minister of Finance when the assets of the people are being sold off either to international economic hitmen or those who sit around a table with CNN correspondents and boast about being the most powerful 1%.
I rise again on Standing Order 46-1 for the very reason that I rose 4 times already.
Senator Nakhid, continue, but continue under, yes.
Who will protect us? The government has already sold property in Flagstaff, Federation Villas.
I'm so sorry, again, with the greatest of respect, to rise on 46-1.
Nakhid, I hope I don't have to. You have very few minutes left. You need to. You finish at, if you're allowed to, because I'm getting up too many times to ask you to come back to the bill. So you will finish at 5:21 if you become relevant to the matters at hand.
Madam President, guided. Madam President, the assets of the people of this country are being sold with zero transparency and zero accountability. For this is why the procurement, independent procurement regulator is needed. Madam Speaker, I turn to clause 5 of the bill. In particular, the proposed amendments to section 7, subsection 5 of the bill, which reads, "This act shall not apply to the following services provided to public bodies or state-controlled enterprises." Subclause B, which deals with financial services. Madam President, in the last 5 years, we have seen the phenomenal growth of a finance house named NCB Global, which before 2015 was a virtual lightweight in the finance industry, and now is dealing in transactions worth billions of dollars. The government needs to tell the country how much money it has borrowed from NCB Global from 2015 to now.
Senator Nakhid, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you. The government needs to tell the Senate the value of financing provided by NCB Global to any and all public bodies and state enterprises from 2015 to present. The government needs to tell this Senate, and by extension this country, What rates of interest we borrowed at from NCB Global. Madam President, I turn quickly to clause 7 of the bill. I have to ask, why are we narrowing the categories of persons with this amendment? So now we are limiting the persons to those who have been convicted of corruption or fraud in the last 10 years. Why 10 years? We shouldn't be doing business with convicted fraudsters at all. Why are we narrowing the categories of convicted persons we can do business with? Why not include all offenses of dishonesty? Why are we leaving this door open, Madam President? Madam President, with respect to clause 5 of the bill, I want to ask the government, when did they decide that section 7, subsection 2 of the act give rise to uncertainty? And if that is reasonable justification for not bringing the act into operation? And I ask this in the context of transactions dealing with offshore patrol vessels and other marine assets. I ask in the context of the sale of Petrotin to a local entity having failed to materialize spectacularly. And if, as the government is saying, the section gives rise to uncertainty, can they share with the Senate any legal opinions that they have solicited to that effect? Who arrived at that conclusion? That section 7, subsection 2, gives rise to uncertainty. Is it an esteemed lawyer, senior counsel, or someone in the cabinet? Madam President, I would like to end with a quote, as my time has run out. Having already noted that many prominent citizens, like former Senate President and Law Association, has come out against these amendments, I leave with some hope. Inspirational quote from son of the soil, Peter Minshall. The cancer of corruption, and I quote, the cancer of corruption corrodes the body politic. A corruption of spirit, a primitive, barbaric immorality of the soul. The beautiful island tapestry is being torn to shreds. A monument of enormous gaudy crassness replaces it, casting a dangerous and murderous shadow. Madam President, through you, we are reminded that we are here to protect the interests of the people, the society, and the state. But more importantly, we have a sacred duty to protect democracy and our young people from that dark, dangerous, and murderous shadow that this bill, as laid, will simply and clearly bring upon our blessed country. I thank you.